Hey guys, AJ with Relentless Racing. Welcome back to the channel. In our previous episode of MR2 Spyder rear knuckle rebuild, we focused on the Techno Toy Tuning rear knuckle bearings. In part 2 of the MR2 Spyder rear knuckle rebuild, we're going to talk about the rear wheel bearing, the rear hub, and we're also going to install some ARP Extended Studs. Now, let's push out these bearings. Before we do, we're going to have to remove the snap rings on both of these guys. So we're going to use some snap ring pliers. These guys right here. Now remember, we PB blastered these guys, and we're just going to use these guys. Might have to use a pick as well, or an awl, or flathead screwdriver. There she is. So once you get it up just like that, you just kind of walk it around and she comes out. There she goes. That's what we're looking at here. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll take these guys and I'll clean them up with some Scotch-Brite, and then I'll apply some anti-seize on them so that way they don't get stuck in these guys. So here is the knuckle with the bearing in here. Obviously we took out this other section right here. And then here's the other side, which is where we took the circlip from, right? So that means that this bearing needs to come out from this side and needs to come out this way. So you have to support it right here, right on this edge right here, and then push on this side, pushing that bearing out this way. So there is a kit for this. You could either use the kit or you can use the press. I prefer to use the kit, but you can use the press, but you're using the pieces from the kit. So might as well use the kit or the tool, and let me show you guys that now. So I've got my tool over here. This is the OMT bearing removal adapter puller. So you pretty much just need to support the bottom side of this guy, and then we're gonna push the bearing out that way. So you gotta find a piece that's going to fit into there. See, this one fits right in there. There's no interruption of it, and that's essentially going to push that bearing out of there. So there's plenty of these pieces here. This one's too big, this one's too big. So you just have to find the right one, and it fits right inside right there, okay? And then on this side, you need to find a sleeve that fits in here, and it needs to rest right there. So let's see, is it this one? Yeah, it's this one. So this thing sits right on that sleeve, right there. You can kind of see how well it fits right there, and it sits right on this ledge right here, and it'll allow the bearing to come through here when we push that through there. So just kind of position this guy, make sure it sits well, and then you take this guy and this guy. So let's see, where's the closure piece for this one? Is it this one? Gotta put a, okay, that's the right piece there. Let's see, oh, this one's a little bit bigger. So let's put a washer on each side. And put that like that. This like this. And then this guy like that. And then here is the big nut. So put that guy on there. And all you gotta do is tighten this guy down. And that's essentially what gets your bearing out of there. So let me just square that up just a little bit. You kind of see the setup, how it is. So if we just tighten this thing, it'll pull this guy through into that side, pulling the bearing out. So let's use our gun. This side is a 27 millimeter. This is like a 32. So I don't have a 32 wrench, so I'm just gonna use this guy. Oh, looks like it's pulling it crooked. Looks like we're stuck on something. Just double check it, make sure everything's okay. Yeah, looks like it's working all right. This thing was a little cockeyed in there. Maybe it is too big, so. Or it's not pulling that side down evenly. Let's see. Yeah, it's pulling it in crooked, I think. See the spacing right there? So the other thing we could do is we could take these balls out of here. So I'm just gonna rip these balls out of here, and then there's a little cage. I have to pick all these up again. There's a little cage inside. I guess we could have done this first. And then you could rip this cage out like that. There's another cage right here. And now we could actually push on this guy, and now that will seat a little bit better. So let's see, how's it looking? Actually, it looks like it's pushing okay. All right, let's try it again. And she just came apart. So we'll just undo this guy. And poof, there's the bearing. And this thing should jump right out. And that's what the bearing looks like right there. Pretty cool. It's wheel bearing time. So these are the two knuckles. As you can see, this knuckle right here has the new bearing pressed into it. So the key to pressing in wheel bearings, it's really, really simple. There's really two methods. One, you use like a tool kind of like what this guy is, and this is the Orion MotorTech bearing removal adapter puller. And essentially what happens is you put a piece on the back right here, kind of sits like this. Then you put the bearing on top over here, and then you put a top on it like this one. Let me just grab the bearing. And this is an NSK bearing. It is a 40BWD12. So you just open this puppy up, and as I mentioned before, you want to make sure that you check your bearing and make sure that it's the correct size, so that way you don't try and push in the wrong bearing. So you'll take your bearing, and this one is symmetrical. Some OEs require you to push the bearing in a particular way, but this one's symmetrical, so they'll have numbers on one side, other side won't. Sometimes they'll have something will be black here, and it'll tell you which way to put the black section, but in the OE manual, it doesn't tell you that. So let me continue on with this first method. You put this little guy on the back, put it on like that, and then you put your bearing in here. Again, it doesn't matter which way it goes. Kind of position that on there, and then you'll find the adapter, the correct adapter, which will be a little smaller OD than this guy. And what happens is it actually pushes on the outer race. This is the outer race right here, this OD right here. This is the inner race. And so when you put this on here, it has to be a little bit smaller. If it's too big, you won't be able to push in the bearing all the way. You won't be able to seat all the way. So you'll put that in like that. And then there is a screw that goes in here with a washer. And then on the back side, you're going to put another washer, and then you'll put in this drive nut. So once this is all together, kind of screw this thing down, make sure everything is concentric and seated properly, like that. And once it's seated properly like this, you're just gonna tighten these guys up, and it'll actually press the bearing in. I don't like this particular method because sometimes the bearing will get cockeyed a little bit. So I prefer to use the press, and I'll use some of these pieces actually. So check this thing out. Let's go to the press and I'll show you how that works. So let's take this thing all apart. Drive nut, washer, little adapter plate, and then this guy right here. So you've got this thing. We're going to need that guy on the press. And then that's pretty much all we're going to use. We're just going to need this guy. Okay, we're back at the press. You kind of see the knuckle. It's supported by some press plates. Use that same adapter. We want to make sure that that thing is concentric, because again, it's a little smaller diameter. And then we're going to use this 38mm socket to help us distribute load. And then we're going to position this guy so that way it's perfectly aligned with the ram. Just like that. Make sure she's concentric. Make sure that everything's out of the way when the press pushes down. And then here we go. You heard it load up, and that means that the bearing was seated properly. Pull the socket off, Pop this guy off, and check it out. That is seated properly in there. So check these guys out. We just pulled these things out of some evaporust. They sat in there for, I don't know, 24 hours, and then I put a little Scotch-Brite on them. And so I'm going to coat these guys, and these are the Circlips for the knuckles, and these are what hold in the rear wheel bearings. So we'll give those a good coat. Do the same thing here. Again, anti-seize is your friend. So this will help with making sure these guys don't ever get stuck, and it helps a lot with the corrosion prevention process. So the other thing I like to do is there's a groove that this thing sits into, so I like to run this brush right inside that groove, make sure that thing is totally lubricated right where the Circlip goes. And we did this once already, so you know we can do it again. And then I like to coat the top of this thing as well with anti-seize. Keep that bearing nice and fresh. Okay, so let's spread these guys. Get a good, nice, even coat. Good, nice, even coat. Now we're going to do a little bit of work with some snap ring pliers. These guys here from Channellock. You're pretty much just going to try and set this guy in here. And then we're going to collapse it just a little bit. And just squeeze this guy together here. Okay, I flipped these guys around so they don't have the sharp tip on them. They kind of look like this. See how it looks? It has the sharp tip. So I'm using the fat tip on the end. So that allowed me to grip it a little bit better, and then just give her a squeeze. Almost got her. And it looks like that dropped in. I want to make sure that the thing's actually in there. So we'll give it a little tap with a hammer and just kind of try and move it around. So here you could see the snap ring sitting right here. This is it right here. And just to verify it's seated properly, we could take this guy and just kind of give it a tap downwards and do it in 3 locations. And then I like to try and hit this guy to make it move around the circumference. So it looked like it moved a little bit, and that looks like it's seated properly. And you could also compare this distance right here, from here to here, compare it to this guy, and this guy looks like it's thicker. So that means that it is actually in the little slot in here for it. So the other way you could check if this thing is seated properly is you can kind of like look all the way around, check how it is, and then you could take a little awl and kind of go like this, and you could kind of pry it, and you could see that it's seated in the groove. So that thing is money. And then all we're gonna do is we're gonna apply some more anti-seize right in here, keep it nice and coated right on top of the bearing, just like that. And that looks good to me. And if you're super anal like I am, you could do a quick cleanup like this. And then we could also coat this side. And there you go. Dilemma time. I bought this Dorman hub here, 930418. I popped out all of the studs, you can see, right? But when I went to go put one of these ARP studs in it, this hole it's too small. Sorry, it goes in that way. So the hole's too small. I could drill this thing out. It probably needs to, you know, I probably need to drill that thing out to like 520 or something like that. I didn't actually measure the hole, what have you. But to use ARP studs, you either have to drill out this hole or go back to the factories and use those. So I'm going to reuse these factory hubs, and you can see this one, I already put in my extended studs. I'll show you how I did that in just a second. So what I do is I use a tube. This is 1.5 by 120 wall. You kind of see that, and I'm not so sure exactly how tall this is. Probably, I don't know, maybe 8 inches, something like that. And you essentially just, this thing supports that guy like that. You hold it on here like that, and the press pushes the thing in. There is a tool for this. Give me a second, I'll show you guys. This is the tool for an alternate method of installing the studs. I showed this in an earlier video. I'll tag it down in the description, but this is the Lisle 22800, and this is essentially how it works. You pretty much just grab this guy like this. You have your stud on there, and then you put this guy on here. This is a bearing down here, and so this goes on top of here, and then you grab a lug nut, and then you impact this puppy on until it sits properly in the back. So that's one method, but obviously we're here at this guy, and I'll show you how I do it. Again, this is an alternate method. Okay, let's get back to the action. So this guy right here, you want to know that this thing has to point out this way, because this is the side that wheel bearing goes on, and so this is the part that sticks out towards the wheel. So now we're just going to support the bottom of this guy like this. And you want to make sure that the pipe isn't riding on this radius right here. So make sure that it's sitting flat like this. And make sure your finger's not in the way. And then we're going to apply the ram down. And it's set very well. If you look right here, there's no gap right there. And voila! That's how it's done. So we have our left rear knuckle right here, the wheel bearings installed, and in episode 1 we put in the Techno Toy Tuning rear knuckle bearing in this section here. The important part when you're pressing in the hub is, 1, you should lubricate this with anti-seize. Lubricate that with anti-seize, especially this leading edge right here. And then the other important thing is, when you go to press this hub in, it's important that you support the inner race. Otherwise, you're going to end up damaging this brand new wheel bearing. So I use this socket right here, place it right here. It's the perfect size for that guy, and it'll support the inner race. So place your socket right here, kind of line it up. Put this guy like this, and then you got to position this guy properly so that way the arm falls through and this arm falls through. This is for the rear toe arm, and this is for the shock body. So let's see if we can't get this thing positioned properly. That kind of looks close. I'll stick my fingers in here and make sure that the socket is supporting the inner race. And then we're going to put our hub on there, which was already lubricated with anti-seize. Kind of put this right here. And then I grabbed these two pieces from that OMT kit that I used earlier. So we're going to put this guy right in here. You can see where it pushes. And then this guy goes right on the top, just like that. And it looks pretty sound. Let me just push it back just a little bit like that. And then we're going to press this guy in. So I'm going to stop here a second because I'm going to let my air compressor catch up. So I waited for my air compressor to catch up, so that way when this thing fully seats, I can hear the air over hydraulic bottle jack load up. That way I know this thing is fully pressed in. Here we go. You heard it load up, and that's it. And check it out. New wheel bearing, new hub, well, used hub, and brand new ARP Extended Studs, and smooth rotation. So the next time you hear a growl coming from the left or right rear corner of your car, it's a good possibility it's a failing wheel bearing. So I hope this video can help you become a certified U2 mechanic like myself. Part 3 of the MR2 Spyder rear knuckle rebuild dives deep into T3 suspension arms, including the rear traction arms, the rear lower control arms, and the rear toe arms. So subscribe and hit that notification button so you don't miss part 3.
This is AJ with Relentless Racing. Stay relentless, and I'll see you on the track.